based on all the science and research that you've seen, what would you say are the 5 things that if people did these 5 things every single day on a consistent basis, their happiness level would go up a point or 2 consistently over time? And it doesn't cost any money and it doesn't take a ton of time. But if you did these 5 things, your life would start to be a lot happier.
Yeah, well, I think we just talked about one. I think this act of becoming other oriented,
Yeah.
however that works for you, whether that's, donating an hour of your time or just like holding the door open for somebody, giving some money, like we all can probably, have enough disposable income to spare a teensy weensy bit. And so what can you do to spend that money on, or that time or whatever, on other people? So that would be topic. That'd be number 1. I think number 2 would be another thing you just echoed in terms of how you're talking about changing your life, which is to show up for other people. So all the research suggests that happy people are really social. They tend to talk to random strangers. They tend to be around other people, and they really make time for the people that they care about in their life. And so I think this would be kind of big change number 2 is like, how can you just be reaching out to people more often? And I think, this is one of these things where like we kind of know it, but we don't often put it into practice, right? If you found out you were on your deathbed, this week, and you knew you had a week to live, you might not like go to work. Like you'd probably like want to focus on those people you care about in your life, like whoever they are. You would see your friends, you would hang out with your family that you care about, you put time into your romantic relationship, whatever. That's what you do. But if you look at how we tend to spend our time, it's, we're caught up in work. Sometimes we're not even present with our family members when we're around them, because we're like, let me put the phone down kind of thing. And so, but happy people don't do that. They're prioritizing right now. And so whatever you can do to shift to being a little more social and a little more kind of social and again, connected with the people you care about, that's like powerful.
So it doesn't have to be strangers socially or fake friends, but being social with people you care about on a consistent basis.
It can actually be the strangers. In fact, there's one study by researcher Nick Epley and his colleagues where he psychologists are always forcing people to do stuff with money, but so he forces people with money to talk to strangers on the train. He does this on the L train in Chicago. So he says, for the next half hour, you have to talk to somebody and make a connection. People predict this is going to be actively miserable and weird and cheesy.
But
and all
it's
this
amazing.
stuff.
You did an episode on this too.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's one of our famous episodes. I actually got hate mail after that episode because people were like, you're crazy telling people to talk to people on the train, like you're going to get people killed and all this stuff. But I think that's how strong our intuitions are, right? Is that we really think, oh my God, talking to some random person in the coffee shop, I'd rather just pull out my phone and check my Instagram feed. But again, our minds are leading us in the wrong direction here. So,
okay. All right. So the first 2 are others oriented and showing up for others.
Yeah, I think the third one would be to kind of focus on the power of gratitude. Again, it always sounds so cheesy when you mention these things, but sometimes science is cheesy. But I think our instinct when things are good and when things are bad is that it's funny to kind of gripe about stuff, right? It's funny to kind of complain. You probably even have people in your life that whenever you see them, you just start like the complaining fest like happens. But that's not what happy people do. Happy people are spontaneously counting their blessings. And this is a spot where I think popular culture has gotten onto something with things like gratitude lists or gratitude journals, like just taking time to count your blessings, even if it's like 30 seconds at night.
Yeah.
You can see statistical boosts in happiness in about 2 weeks of that practice.
And I do this with my girlfriend every night before we go to bed. We both say 3 things we're grateful for, and it puts our mind at peace. It gives us a moment of reflection of, even if, there's a lot of stress in the world with the virus and the pandemic and everything, even with all that, it's still good things to be grateful for. So it's just reminding ourselves to calm our mind down before we go to bed. And then when we sleep, we have a grateful heart. You wake up with a grateful heart as opposed to an angry heart. And I think the more you go to sleep frustrated, angry, and ruminating over things you don't have or you don't like about what's happening in your life, the sleep isn't as quality, and you wake up more tired and you become more reactive the next day. And that's why I think you're right. The power of gratitude. This is something that I swear by. And without it, I'd be unhappy.
Yeah, no, again, it's all about also like kind of just being mindful of these things, right? I mean, sometimes I'll leave a like gripe fest with a friend and just notice and be like, I feel really crappy now. I thought like getting all that off my chest and like complaining about whatever. But no, I think yeah, and there's lots of evidence suggesting that gratitude can have a specifically powerful effect on sleep. Even things like immune function, like it makes
Mm,
our immune systems work better, and so which is
yeah.
something else we need right now in the context of this virus. So
How much does griping or talking about the things you don't like, how much does that actually affect your happiness? I mean, I'm all for creating a container where I'm saying, hey, listen, for the next 10 minutes, I just want to share things I'm frustrated about. But then here's all the things I'm grateful for to kind of get both of them out.
yeah,
But
yeah.
is there science or research that says, like, if you talk about negative things or you complain with your friends or you talk about what you don't like, gossip, it's going to bring your happiness level down? Or is this just a theory?
Yeah, I mean, it's more, it's less that, so I think part of it is how you're griping, right? And so
Uh,
you can gripe about like everything's terrible, and therefore I'm going to problem solve by doing X, Y, and Z. If
mm-hmm.
you do that where you're kind of griping to problem solve, then that can be really powerful because it can be kind of identifying problems and then fixing them. But if you're griping just to like gripe, and there's no like forward motion on
There's
it,
no solutions.
exactly, that's not really helpful, and it comes at an opportunity cost. You could be spending that time talking about what you're grateful for.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do with friends now is, because I definitely still have friends where, they're in gripe headspace. That's what they're gonna do. But like whenever we're in that space, either move it more towards problem solving, like,
Mm.
oh yeah, okay, that coworker is a pain in the butt, but like what can we do to make the situation better? What can we, so try to move it towards problem solving, or try to do exactly what you said, which is like, you can fill up your frustration bucket, but kind of match it with a bucket that's equally filled with, what
Yeah.
are your blessings?
Okay. So that's number 3, power of gratitude.
Yeah. Number 4 is kind of a smushed one, but it's basically
Smush it
that,
up, Lori.
yeah, it's like, I'll throw together a bunch of things under the context of like healthy habits. And by that, what I mean is like things we know are good for our physical health, but we often forget that our physical health and our mental health are intertwined.
Mm-hmm.
So, getting some regular exercise and movement in, making sure you're prioritizing sleep and having good sleep habits. So it's not just like you plop down for a certain number of hours a night, but you're really trying to do things before you go to bed and during your day to make sleep better. Even healthy eating, like we forget the connection between our gut and our brain, between our
Yeah.
bodies and our brain, between our stress levels and our brain. And so we really have to kind of make sure we're protecting our physical health, because that has a huge implication on our mental
Mm-hmm.
health.
Yeah. I just had a doctor on today, actually, on my show, Dr. Stephen Gundry, who talks about essentially how to boost the immune system, how to reverse disease, how to de-age, all these things about the body. And he was a heart surgeon for 40 years and stopped doing heart surgeries because he realized that wasn't solving the root problem. Nutrition and other things solve the root problem of disease. And he was saying all disease is stemmed from like a leaky gut, and the foods we eat create a holes in the gut where things seep through, and then it causes eczema and it causes different disease because the immune system is broken down, which attracts disease. And so it's all about the things we eat to make sure we boost our immune system and we feel better, we have greater energy, and it also connects to the brain, everything, the heart, the brain, and the gut. So just like you said, I think that's a great point. So you're
Yeah,
you're
and that's
pushing.
food, but I mean the exercise and sleep connection is even, I mean there's evidence suggesting that like a half hour of cardio every day is as effective as a prescription of Zoloft for reducing depression symptoms, right? So
Wow.
these psychiatrists, might not make as much money if they're prescribing, hey, hop on the treadmill or your Peloton, for a half hour, but that's what the data suggests. And then same thing with sleep. I feel like we could solve most of the mental health crisis on college campuses if we just got these kids to sleep.
That's it. If they just
Yeah.
weren't exhausted.
Mhm.
Overwhelmed and exhausted is a combination for unhappiness.
Exactly. And not making good decisions and not learning and doing all the stuff we need them to do on college
Yeah,
campuses.
and then just needing the sugar fix to like stay awake, and needing some adrenaline, so checking social media or whatever it is, doing the wrong choice to get the fix to keep them awake or have some attention because they're so distracted. Okay, so the fourth was a smush of movement,
Healthy habits,
exercise,
healthy habits.
healthy
Yeah.
habits, sleep, all those things. And then what would you say the fifth one?
And I think the fifth one, I mean, again, I'm, cutting off here, but I think the fifth one would be finding ways to practice being more mindful and being more present. And I mean that in a couple ways. One is like, the standard Buddha meditation-y way to be present, where you're like paying attention to the present moment. But it's also just like paying attention to your body and where you are with things. I mean, we mentioned this a little bit when you're thinking about the griping of like, afterwards, after that gripe fest session, I'm like, I feel kind of yucky, you know. Maybe after you like do something nice and give somebody something at Starbucks, you have a presence and notice like,
Hmm.
I feel kind of good, like my heart feels warmed, I'm breathing in a different way, and so on. And so I think, you know, we constantly have these theories about what we should be doing with our time, but if we actually pay attention to how our bodies feel and be present during it, we can see whether we're going in the right direction or the wrong direction. For me, this is so true on social media in general, but particularly right now during the virus, right? It's like
Hmm.
I have this intuition of like, oh, I'm like bored or feeling a little anxious. Like, I'm gonna just do a quick Twitter check. I'm just gonna hop on Facebook just for a second. And if I notice how I feel right afterwards, I'm like, I feel either apathetic or bored, or my anxiety has spiked, or I feel kind of inadequate and sort of yucky about myself. Like I want to buy something.
Hmm.
Like none of those are good feelings that I wanted. But if you're not present and you don't notice them, then you just act on those urges. You know, I'm kind of buying something because I feel inadequate or
I
whatever.
know. So consuming is what I'm hearing is one of the worst things we can do, especially if you're an anxious person.
Yeah, and again, I think it kind of matters the kind of person you are. Like I have a very nerdy husband who's a philosopher, and he can look at the stats and just not get
And
kind
just
of like
block it. Yeah.
blown up in it, you know. And so for him it's okay, but you know, we've had to work on kind of exactly what you're saying, is that he'll tell me and I'm like, my chest is pounding, like I'm not be able to sleep. And it's like you kind of have to, this is I think an important thing for friendships and relationships, is like different people are at different points with this, and you got to kind of regulate depending on who you're
Yeah.
talking to and what they need.
Yeah.
I
It's
mean,
like,
there's probably some friends that you want the opposite. You know, I have other friends who are like, you know, not taking this seriously and not sheltering in place. And for
right.
them,
And
I'm
doing
like, let
spring
me tell you the
break.
latest
Yeah.
horrible statistics, you know? So
Yeah. They're in Cancun with all their friends at the bars or whatever and saying, who cares if I get it? Right. That's not the way you want to
exactly.
be
So,
either.
and that's a good way to think about emotions in general, is that they're functional. Like emotions have a purpose, right? There's a purpose to why my chest freaks out when I see these statistics, is like, I'm supposed to take action. I'm supposed to wash my hands. I'm supposed to socially
Hmm.
distance. But once you're already taking action, the anxiety is not really helping. And the good news is
It's not helping.
we have tools to not get rid of it, because all, like, let's be fair, this is an awful, grieving, sad, yucky time. We're
Hmm.
going to feel that stuff, but we can have some control over how much we feel it, when we feel it, when it's appropriate to feel it, and so on.
Yeah. And if we're seeking joy and happiness, there's definitely times of our life where we may not feel that because of grief, because of loss, because of deaths, because of losing a career, losing a person close to you, breaking up in a relationship. There are grieving periods for sure, and this is one of them. And I think what I'm hearing you say is you can still find joy and not be exhausted all day long and useless as a human being. You can still find joy through just following through on a few of these things, which is getting out of self and what you're angry about and say, well, how can I be a solution by calling a friend, FaceTiming someone, showing up and doing something nice for someone? How can I, work out? How can I try to get some little bit extra sleep? How can I eat a little bit better? Just make a better decision the next decision. And it's not easy, but it's worth it if you want to be happy. It's the only things you can do to be happy, really. So,
Exactly. All of it reminds me of this wonderful parable. It comes from Buddhist tradition of the second arrow. And the way this parable works is, so Buddha's talking to students and he's asking his students, and he says, you know, if you get shot with an arrow on the street, is that really bad? And people say, yeah, that's super bad, getting shot with an arrow. And Buddha asks, okay, would it be worse if you were shot with like a second arrow too? And people are like, yeah, second arrow would be worse, you know, 2 times as bad as the first arrow. And so then Buddha goes on to explain, he's like, look, the bad stuff that happens in life is the first arrow. You know, we're living through a pandemic. That is a big arrow that we're getting hit with. But our reactions to it is the second arrow, right? You know, it is, you know, we might lose loved ones. We might be trapped in the house. We might, you know, my Yale students, for example, the seniors aren't going to have graduation. They've lost all their weeks of party with their friends. They're in mourning. But to like not eat healthy or not exercise or fight with your spouse or, you know, cry in your covers all the time, like in some ways that second part is on you. You know, you might not be able to control
mm,
COVID-19, but you can control, you know, how much sleep you get tonight, or what you know, again, the best choices you make. And, you know, sometimes we're going to stab ourselves with those second arrows, but the idea is to reduce them as much as possible. A lot of those are in our control.
Yeah, I mean, disaster is inevitable. Pain is inevitable. Bad things are going to happen, but it's a greater disaster to respond in a negative way, to fall down and pity yourself and hurt yourself more. That's the greater disaster, is what I'm hearing you say.
That's right. That's right. And again, within reason, because I always like to put in, like with a little self-compassion,
Of
right? Because there are
course,
going
yeah,
to be the,
we're not perfect.
there are the ice cream Netflix days, like that's
Oh
going to be a
man,
second arrow, right?
no,
But
I get it. Yeah, but it's the consistency of it every day after day. You're in control of. Here's a question, because I want to make sure that I'm very careful when I talk about control and mental health and mental illness and mental challenges, depression, anxiety. You know, there's different doctors and research that'll say like you can cure depression, mental health, like you have tools that you can apply. And then there's other people that will say, no, this is a chemical imbalance, that this is who I am. I can't be fixed. I need medication for the rest of my life. Where are you at with this in terms of mental health and depression, anxiety, the spectrum of it? I feel like I went through more depression type thoughts and anxiety and suicidal thoughts when I was a lot younger. And now over time, with practice, with improving myself every single day and going through challenges, I feel like I don't have those thoughts anymore. But I always thought something was wrong with me. What's your opinion on this? Is there a spectrum for mental illness and mental health? Can you improve your ability to be less mentally ill or depressed? Or is this something we are born with and it's chemically unable to change?
yeah, I think, I mean, it's worth remembering that there is a spectrum of this stuff, and the kinds of interventions you want to take at different points in that spectrum might look different. And so the analogy I always would use is with health stuff. So imagine you come in, I'm a doctor, and you come into my office and you say, hey, doctor, I have high blood pressure, I'm a little overweight. I would be like, you need to hit the treadmill every day for half hour. But if you
Mm-hmm.
walk into my office and you're like clutching your heart and you're like, I'm in acute cardiac arrest, doctor, what do I do? I'm not going to say, hey, get on the treadmill because like you need to hop on the
Yeah.
treadmill today, right? Like you need something different. And I think, if your listeners are feeling like acutely suicidal, like you're in the midst of a panic attack, I'm not going to say, hey, write a little gratitude, list right now. Like you're going to need a different kind of care. You're going to need something that deals with something much more acute. And I think, medications in those cases, professional therapy, like those are tools we know empirically tend to work. And there's lots of individual differences of who it works better for and so on. But like those are tools that are there for acute cases. I think if you're just kind of feeling like, I'm a little depressed and I'm not flourishing right now, or I'm feeling really anxious in the current situation, that's when you're in the kind of crisis where a lot of these long-term tools can really help. These tools that like build on themselves over time. So that kind of just like in the exact way you were sharing with
Mm-hmm.
your story, where it's like you start with baby steps and then these things become habits that you're doing all the time that are protecting your mental health. But
Yeah. What's the difference between mental health and happiness?
I think it kind of depends on your definition. I mean, I think, mental health is all the things that kind of go into whether we're feeling happy, whether we're feeling flourishing, whether we're experiencing positive emotion, and so on. I think there's a lot of fight about these different definitions, but we kind of know it. Like you both want to be mentally healthy and happy, and there's some overlap. There might be some nuance around the edges, but, mostly they're good things to shoot for.
Yeah. And you talk about this in your class about rewirements. Is it possible for us to actually change who we are and rewire our minds, our thoughts, and our level of happiness? Or is this,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the answer to that is like, yes, but not maybe in the way you think, right? It's possible to rewire our habits just like it's possible to like become healthier in terms of our physical fitness or lose a bunch of weight or something like that, right? You can do it, but it's not like you go to the gym once and then you're good and then
mm-hmm,
you pack up your gym bag and that's it. Like you actually have to put in constant effort. And so the research suggests that it's for sure possible to change your levels of happiness. Every single one of your listeners could achieve higher levels of statistical well-being. It's not going to be perfect all the time. It's not going to change, but
yeah,
everybody can get better. But to do that, it takes work. It
yeah,
takes like, sleep and exercise every day. It takes being social even when you don't feel like it. It takes being other oriented when you're kind of in selfish mode. Like You have
Hmm.
to do those habits over time. The good news is as you do them more and more, and I think as you see the benefits, kind of like as you said in your own story, it becomes a little easier to do it, both because it's kind of like a habit that you're used to, but also you've seen the rewards. So when you're kind of not feeling it, you're like, okay, I'm really craving this ice cream right now, but like, maybe it's better for me to just like, hit my yoga mat instead, right? So you
Yeah.
kind of know a little bit what's going to work better.
I'm curious, as a professor and with someone who's got all this spotlight on them right now, and all these people are taking your class at school and around the world, podcast is blowing up, all these things. I'm sure the book deals are in the works and all this stuff are happening. Do you ever feel like an imposter? And I don't want to say this to like in a negative way, but I've felt this way over my career different times of like, man, I'm saying these things, but am I living up to them at the highest level for myself? Is there ever moments where you feel like, gosh, I'm teaching this, but I'm not happy with myself in what I'm teaching because I
Yeah.
know I'm not living up to it fully, like sometimes, but is there anything like that for you?
I mean, are there ever moments where I'm not? I mean, I think that's the real question. I mean, no, I think one of the challenging things about this work is that just knowing the science doesn't change my intuitions, right? Like, I know all the things I'm supposed to be doing, but that doesn't instantly mean that I'm doing them.
Mm,
In class, we talk about this other fallacy that kind of gets back to 80s culture. It's called the G.I. Joe fallacy. I don't know if you know G.I. Joe. G.I. Joe was this 80s cartoon,
yeah,
army dudes, had this famous saying at the end that like knowing is half the battle, and go GI Joe and stuff, if you remember. But
sure.
but but it turns out that this idea that knowing is half the battle is a fallacy. Like we
Mm,
think once I know what I'm supposed to do, I read this management book, I read the self-help book, now I know what I'm supposed to do. That is not, it's not half the battle. It's probably like not even 10% of the battle. It's most of the battle is putting it into effect in your own life. And so there are lots of times when I slack off and I'm not putting it into effect in my own life. I'm acutely aware of what I acutely aware of what I'm supposed to do. I acutely know what I'm supposed to do, but I'm aware that I'm not doing it. And I
I'm
think I think honestly, that's one of the reasons people like the class and the podcast is that they see that I'm kind of a screw up too. Like I'm an honest indication that like this stuff takes work and we're not going to be perfect and it takes baby
yeah.
steps. And that's what you need to kind of feel better.
I mean, it seems pretty common knowledge that most of the world knows that you shouldn't be eating bad food if you want to lose weight. And yet we know, it's like you said, we know the knowledge, like eat less and you'll probably lose weight and feel a little bit better. Don't eat the sugar all day long and you're probably going to feel better. It's most people know this information, but we don't put it into action. Is it just because it's hard? Is it because we don't care enough about the desired result? Is it because there's a disconnect? Why is that?
Yeah, I think part of it's because it's hard. Part of it actually is an accident of neuroscience that I'm totally fascinated with, this accident of how our brains are hooked up. So it turns out that there are different circuits in the brain for wanting something, like the craving that you get and like the amount that you want to go after something, and really actually liking something, like how much you enjoy it when you actually do it. Super weird that the brain doesn't line those up, but they don't. The biggest case where you see that is in the case of addiction. So people who are heroin addicts, for example, incredibly crave the drug. They're going to steal from their
Mm,
family or do whatever. But then when they actually get it, they're really habituated to the drug. So they don't actually even enjoy it that much when they get it. Like these circuits have totally dissociated. And I think this is what happens with all this stuff. I will, crave a sugary meal or crave sitting on my butt watching Netflix or, crave money or something
mm,
like that. But those cravings don't map onto the liking. And then there's the flip side. There's stuff that I'll really like, doing nice things for others or like really pushing myself at the gym or getting to bed really early, putting down the social media. Like those are not things that I crave at all, but they're things that my body and my mind are really going to like. And it's so stupid that the brain is wired up in this dumb way that they don't align up, but that's the problem.
why, I mean, how do we change the craving then?
So one part is just awareness, right? And so, and you kind of talked about this just even in your own life, right? It's to kind of force the noticing and be present with the liking, right? So when I panic scroll on social media, I notice like, did not like that so much. Hey brain, let's remember,
Mm,
didn't like that so much. When you do something nice for someone else, you're like, actually this felt super good. With exercise, I get this a lot. I feel like I'm slowly rewiring my craving for things like yoga and hard exercise, where it's like, I really try. I had this wonderful yoga teacher for a while who at the end of a really hard practice would say, take a moment to notice what your body feels like after you just did that. Do you
mm.
like that feeling? Again, it's sort of starting to rewire of like, actually, I do like that feeling. Like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna try to go
Do
after
more of
that.
this.
Yeah. And so
So
again, it
coming
gets
back to
back to,
mindfulness, coming back to presence, coming back to awareness of how you feel, awareness of your thoughts, if they were serving you or not, or supporting you, and just trying to do more of those things that support you.
If you're looking for more greatness in your life, make sure to check out this video right here. And also check out our free PDF, The 3 Secrets to Unlock the Power of Your Mind to help you change your life. Download it right here.
When I did one thing bad, it was so overblown, and I felt like everything else was being disregarded.